We're just a little over a year from the turn of the century, and it's not too early to be thinking about a vision for Austin as we near the 21st century. That's the focus of today's Austin Faith Dialogue. You're welcome to join us.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, welcoming you to this edition of the show. It is a fact that we're very close to the turn of the century and the millennium. It's this context that gives us a sense of the urgency that is needed to think about this city's future. So often the needs are so urgent that the City Council is feeling that the problems needed to have been solved yesterday. But what's the vision for the future that controls the decisions that are being made today? And today we have a community activist, someone who's been in Austin for a number of years, who's also on the Austin Metropolitan Ministries Board. She's Rose Lancaster, and we welcome you, Rose, to this edition of the show.
Glad to be here, Rich.
And I think of all the folks that I know in the community who could speak to the issue of a vision for the future, and I think you're the one that could speak to that as well as anyone because you've been here for a while. Like, when did you move to Austin?
We moved here in '55.
Okay. So 40-plus years.
Right.
And during that time, when I came to Austin in '86, you were the director and, as I understand, the founder of Extendicare.
Well, I was in the beginning as a director, but I think your board of directors are usually the founders of the organization.
Others who helped found it, but you were right there from the beginning. And I think that it's from that point forward that you've also been involved in the community in what other ways?
Well, I've been very involved in League of Women Voters both at the Austin and state level. Been president of the local league. I've been director of Manos de Cristo in East Austin. I've been on a number of boards in the community and president of many of them.
Mm-hmm. And currently on the Austin Metropolitan Ministries.
Ministries and many of the homeless organizations and the clinic board, the FQHC board that runs the city clinics.
Okay. Well, I think that as we look into the future of the city, and we look at it particularly from the standpoint of human services, where we ought to be as we go into the 21st century as compared to where we are now. And I think in order to give some focus to it, I'm more aware of your work with on the Homeless Commission. But where do you think we are in meeting the needs of the homeless now, and where ought we to be going as we come closer to the 21st century?
Well, first, I think the homeless is a fairly new phenomena, the problems that we have across the country, fairly, I say, in the last decade and a half, maybe. And Austin really is behind most other communities in meeting those needs. We don't know how long this situation's going to be with us because I think it's tied up with a lot of other things, the gaps growing between the haves and the have-nots, not having affordable housing in such a growth area as Austin is. And so these other things, I think, bear on the homeless picture. With the mayor's initiative, I see a lot of the efforts that have been going on these last 2 or 3 years, and there have been a lot of effort going on, really coming to a point where we're going to see some significant changes.
Okay, just describe the mayor's initiative.
It's taking the homeless task force plan, comprehensive plan with a continuum of starting from prevention all the way to giving people in permanent housing and plugging people in where they need to be plugged in, and making recommendations that we have more shelter downtown, that we have a resource center that is enhances the one that we presently have on 2nd Street, that we enlarge temporary housing for the battered women, because many of them without temporary housing become homeless. that we do more significant things with substance abuse. And so there's a whole continuum of things in the mayor's initiative that task force have been working on very diligently, and will be coming to a head in early 1999, and some of them won't be in fruition until the year 2000. So that's a vision that in the year 2000 that we're going to have these things together. It's not going to cure everything, but that at least all these pieces that are floating around out there will have some order to them.
Now, one time there was the discussion about having a campus for homeless folks, like the one in Orlando, Florida. And it seems like that was not supported.
It wasn't supported mainly because the nature of Austin doesn't have some of the areas that other big cities have. A lot of abandoned warehouse districts and where this could fit into. There wasn't a feasible place for it would have taken 3 acres. And there just was not a feasible place because we looked, we must have looked at 80 or 90 properties. And everywhere that we thought, well, hey, this ought to be a good thing, then we discovered that somebody else had an idea for using that. For example, over at the Coliseum, that's behind that, we thought, now here's some property that if these people need a better place, and maybe that would fit. But then, of course, the parklands and all of that. There was the animal shelter, and once again, that's dedicated parkland. And there were some other places.
So there were all kinds of problems and objections that came up to that.
It just didn't fit.
Okay. So now we're with the mayor's plan, which it sounds like it's got a number of pieces to it, but that the focal point of it would be a downtown shelter.
It would be a resource center that would be, the city will make a lease with Salvation Army to use the southern half of the block where they are, that's owned by the Salvation Army. The city would contract with them to lease that for a multiple number of years. And then they would contract with the Capital Area Homeless Alliance, more than likely, to run the resource center. And then they would expand a shelter for men. Both of these concepts were the centerpieces for the campus.
I see.
So
that did carry
they were
over.
the main, yes, that did carry over, and with very little changes, in fact. With the shelter being more of an open air, more informal shelter, and it has other things built in. So with these 2 pieces in place, the others we will be working on with the local churches around to provide different things, and Caritas is right there, working on their new building. So I think it's all coming together, and people are talking. Everybody's at the table. The business people, the 6th Street merchants are all at the table with social service people and homeless people themselves. And I think we'll come up with something good for the
Now, what about the religious community? You were mentioning the churches just now as having a role in this. What would that role be particular?
Well, the churches downtown, we met this morning, and they are eager to have a part in this. St. David's is renovating their church, and they want to dedicate a piece of that where Caritas was to serve the homeless, if this can be planned together. There's Central Presbyterian Church within a block and a half of the new site. There's First Baptist Church the other direction north, and St. Mary's. All of these churches are already involved with homeless work. They have the International Interfaith Hospitality Network, where people come in, homeless families, and stay in their facilities a week at a time and then rotate. So they're keenly aware of what's going on. Many of them are serving on the task force, and they are ready to enlarge and expand what they're doing to make this thing work.
And so Austin Metropolitan Ministries' role in regard to the homeless process is what?
Well, these churches that met this morning, for example, the downtown churches, are a cluster of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. Also, the group that formed to oversee the resource center is not an Austin Metropolitan Ministries product, but it is a product of the individuals in Austin Metropolitan Ministries. The board decided that they were not in a position to take this on when they were looking for a 501c3. So 4 of us out of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, including Frank Cooksey, who was the president, Pat Flood, who's executive director, myself, who was on the board, and Gail Miller, a past president. We formed a 501c3 to operate a resource center. And so we're not connected formally, but we are bringing the religious community along with us for volunteers and other support.
And this resource center will do what?
It will supply basic needs. It will have, the main thing will be intake and assessment of homeless people as they come in to try to establish their needs. At present, they have showers, they have laundry, they have computer room.
Now this is all at the...
This is all down on 2nd Street. But this is the entity that will transfer to the new resource center.
Near the Salvation Army.
And other agencies are co-located there, and this is part of the design too.
Okay.
We will have a medical clinic that's now in Salvation Army, needs to be expanded. It will be part of the resource center. And the city has over $300,000 in their budget this year to make that a reality, the medical clinic.
Okay.
To be part. So it's coming together and very exciting.
Well, I would think that you're encouraged.
I am. I am.
And I think the city should be encouraged that after some time of just sort of flailing around to try to find what's the best public response to this issue of homelessness, it sounds like progress is being made.
The city is serving as a catalyst to make this happen.
I know that you're involved with other issues in the city, the community clinics, or the health clinics you're talking about, the work that you did in Manos de Cristo, and the work before that with extended care. So you bring to your current commitments more than just an interest in homelessness. And I think in the second half of the program I'd like to come to those, and I'd also like to touch upon the issue of race relations that I know that you've got a particular interest in. And can you just say one thing before we take a break on that?
Yes, I think this is where the churches do need to take the leadership. They don't have to establish big programs, but I think we need to sensitize ourselves to the multiculturalism that's around us. And there are various ways to do that. I can't see just manufacturing a lot of big programs and projects to make this happen, but I think within each congregation there are many creative things that people can do to sensitize and just kind of have a sense of awe that there are people living with amongst us that are different, have different viewpoints and different religions. And I think it's time that we get out of our shells and just make some effort, not to do that as a church, but to reach out wherever you are.
It's also time for us to take a break.
Okay.
But just hold that and we'll be right back on the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue today. Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue, where today our focus is upon the future of this city in terms of some of its vital human services. As we come close to the turn of the century, we have with us someone who's been a very active part during the last several decades in Austin, and this is community activist, Austin Metropolitan Ministries board member Rose Lancaster. And Rose, the first half we focused mostly on the issue of homeless matters. But I know that you've been more recently involved as well in the various community health facilities. Tell us about that.
Austin has a great network of health centers, clinics. We have 4 major ones, and several of them have satellites, and in the county we have 4 county clinics, all in one network. And they have excellent staff. The facilities, we've heard from people who've come in to study the system, are some of the best in the country for neighborhood medical clinics. We serve over about 43,000 people that come for over 100,000 visits.
Each year?
Each year.
Wow.
Last year. We have a dental clinic. 2 of the clinics, the one in South and Northeast, both have dental services as well.
Now these clinics are for folks who can't afford to go to private physicians on their own.
They are for Medicaid and Medicare and sliding fee scale. Up to 200% of poverty are on a sliding fee scale. And with the managed care, it has been very difficult for the city-run operated clinics to keep up with all the technology of the record keeping, of people having managed care and choosing their providers, which most of these people choose the clinics to be their providers. So we have had consultants come in to tell us we really need to beef up the efficiency. And the city council brought in Gogio consultants. There are 2 that are running the clinics now that are doing a lot of automation, training staff, looking at the configuration of staff and providers, the doctors and the nurse practitioners versus support staff. Real experts from a company that have other resources to help us bring these up to first class. And this has been talking about vision. I really have a good feeling about our movement in bringing these up to just being just a case that people want to come see, and you know, about the clinic system.
Kind of a showcase for the country.
Showcase, that's what I was
Yeah.
trying to think.
Yeah.
And I think we can do it. The city council has a lot of support for our moving in this direction. The staff out there, I met a doctor in Manor a couple of weeks ago, who's been there for 9 years. And you know, she knows her people. And
Now Manor is not in Austin.
that's one of the county ones.
Oh, I see.
This is one system.
Okay, it's a county-city cooperative.
Right. The Health and Human Services Department is a combined city-county health department.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And this system is under, there's talk now of the county pulling out, but we hope that doesn't happen, and that it remains an integrated system.
Now, what's your role in relation to this?
I'm on the
thing?
board of directors of, they call it Federally Qualified Health Center. FQHC is a federal designation.
Okay. And it's
And
not to
it-
be confused with the People's Community
No,
Fund.
that's a private 501c3. There's a lot of cooperation between those and clinics and Peoples and the others. And this board has to have 50% users on it. And we are, I think we're an 18-member board, meet monthly.
Okay, but you're talking about a lot of folks getting treated through this system.
Yes.
You know,
This-
I knew you when you were director of Montes de Cristo, where there was a dental clinic, and it looks to me like you've got a kind of a natural segue to go from that interest to a broader one with the city and the county.
That's exactly how I got in with a group of advocates
Really?
through representing Montes de Cristo Dental Clinic. Because dental work, it's badly needed. The city has those, but it takes a while, especially dentures. They just cannot fulfill the need there. And I know Manos is just, has always been, you know, trying to find ways to serve more people because they have to turn so many away. So dental need is not being met in our community.
But your vision for the city in the 21st century is to continue on this track and maybe to expand that?
Yes, to be accessible and affordable and to have this seamless continuum from the preventive care, public health, to acute care, and all the things in between so that people aren't have compartments of meeting their health needs. And it's tough because the volatile situation across the country in health care.
Right, right.
So my dream is that we will come out of this with a real integrated system that really serves the needs of the low-income people.
What's the continuing interest that you have in children because of your being the original director of extended care? Do you still have that commitment and interest?
I meet with some people that are looking for funding for daycare. I've stayed in touch with El Buen Pastor Daycare and some daycare on the border, especially infant to 3-year-old, infant stimulation, parenting skills, and so forth. And I think we do have a move on now to really get some more support so that daycare and parenting education can have staff that are well trained, encourage daycare staff to get their credentials and pay them accordingly, because the staff turnover is 50% and you can't have good daycare with that kind of changeover in the chief caregiver of a child.
Isn't it ironical that there's probably no more important profession in the society than the care of children?
And teachers.
And teachers, and they're paid so poorly that there's this much turnover. It makes you wonder about our priorities, doesn't it?
Well, very much so. That could be a vision for the 21st century, but I think visions are so important to get your perspective of what you're doing today. I mean, you may be chasing rainbows, you're being too idealistic, but unless you are, you're not doing real worthwhile things today with a goal. So I think the visioning is important, even if it's a little dreaming.
Yeah. What would you see as Austin Metropolitan Ministries' role in that vision?
Well, we mentioned right before the break about multiculturalism and understanding relationships with one another. I think that's very important. I think bringing faiths together to be able to empower them to speak as one voice in the community makes a difference in the community on whatever issue we think is important. So to keep them involved, and I think Austin Metropolitan Ministries has the facility to do this, to bring more and more of the faith community together to make a difference.
Well, I think that the one thing that, of course, AMM has been known for is like annually it has the Thanksgiving service, which includes people of various faith backgrounds. I say from the Buddhist to the Baptist, as we include on this program, that variety of voices. I think that the whole notion of having interreligious dialogue that has been going on for some years. But I know that you have a particular commitment in terms of racial equality. And do you see that as entering into this diversity and pluralism that you're talking about?
Oh, yes. I mean, you can't have a nation of relationships of people without justice and equality. And sometimes that's so subtle, the inequality and the injustice. But I think we always have to be vigilant to watch for that in our community.
You know, I have to say one of the more inspiring things that I've heard in recent years was an occasion when you gave your faith journey about coming out of Mississippi and your father as a big influence in your life in regard to your commitment to racial justice. Can you share with us a little bit about where you're coming from in that regard?
Well, it is my family background. It started with my grandfather, who was a missionary to Africa and then came back and for the Presbyterian Church helped form colleges for black women in rural areas across the South. And my father followed him and was president of a small black college in Mississippi.
Which one
in
was
rural
that?
Mississippi, Mary Holmes
Okay.
College. It was at that time for, it tried to get rural girls, it was just for girls then because they didn't have any way to get an education, to come into this boarding school and learn to be teachers. And it was a junior college, teachers college, to go back to the rural areas to teach. Because then after 8th grade, you know, there was no facility except in the cities for black women to go to school. So I grew up with that in Atlanta, Georgia, and Mississippi. And I guess it rubbed off on me. And I never thought about it being any different than until, you know, college ages. And I've appreciated that I had that opportunity.
And I know your dad was, you said he was very supportive of the place of women in society.
Yes. I always said, do what you feel like doing and I'll back you up. So it was a great support.
What was his name?
Graham Campbell. So,
Well, I think in a sense that what Rose Lancaster is doing in Austin today is a tribute to Graham Campbell and what he brought to that other part of the country, but has carried over here. And I think that in our closing minute or two here, the extent to which you have been involved in this community since you said you moved here in
55.
55, going on half a century, Rose. You've seen a lot of change. You've seen a lot of progress.
Yes. I think the multiculturalism we talked about has been a big change.
Yeah.
There were not many Hispanics here. There were a lot in San Antonio, but traditionally they had not moved up to this area. And the other cultures that have moved in and into our country, we can frown on it and say it's changing our lifestyle, but I think we can also welcome it as with kind of awe of all of this wonderful diversity that from the world that we have to experience.
Yeah, the energy and the taking it as an enrichment rather than as a difficulty. Well, you have enriched our program today, and we're delighted to have you, Rose Lancaster.
Well, thank you for asking me.
And glad to have you folks joining us. And next week, we'd be glad to have you back on Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Richard Thompson on behalf of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, bidding you peace and good day.